So we want to welcome you to a 4-step guide on how to succeed at practically anything. I'm going to introduce Lori Packer from University of Rochester, just up the road. This presentation is presented also by, it's co-presented by Hyatt Webb, and Lori will mention that. So she's appropriately branded. So Lori, take it away.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everybody. As Brian said, I am from the University of Rochester. My official title, which is still relatively new, is I am the Director of Digital Media and the News Center Editor in the University Communications Office at the University of Rochester. We recently finished a reorganization in my office, and we all got new titles that actually mean something, which was super exciting. Because my title before that was web editor, but I was really just called the web person in the communications office. And I don't know if that matches what some of you folks do. Again, I work in a communications office, and what I tried to describe myself as I was sort of, and still am a little bit, a combination of a front-end web developer, a content creator and manager, and a social media community manager in a central communications office. That's like a full barrel way I describe myself. So I'm a web person in the University Communications Office. And I want to start off this presentation by kind of telling a little bit of a story to kind of explain how I landed at what I've called this 4-step framework on how to succeed at practically anything. So I wanted to start by telling a little bit of a story. I'm a bit of a space geek, and in 2014, at the end of the year, the European Space Agency landed a spacecraft on a comet, this comet. The Rosetta project. If you want to Google it and see some really cool images, please do. And at the same time that was happening, we had a new vice president in my office, which was the beginning of our reorganization and the beginning of a lot of new things at the University of Rochester. And it was sort of making me think, like, what did it take for the scientists and the technicians and the astronauts, the scientists and the technicians at the European Space Station to pull this off, to actually land a moving spacecraft on a moving comet in outer space? That's kind of amazing. So what do they need to do to be able to succeed at that? And at the same time, we were starting the beginnings of a process to reorganize our newsroom, for example. And I was like, I wonder which is harder, landing a spacecraft on a comet or redesigning a central news site at a university. But as I thought about it, I had what I'll call an epiphany. And most of my epiphanies are really kind of super obvious and simple, which I guess is helpful because it makes them easy to remember. But it kind of hit me that really there are basically 4 things you need to do to succeed at practically anything in the field of human endeavor. And that's what the rest of this presentation will be about, kind of outlining those things. And in my world, the thing that we focus on is content strategy. Again, I work in a communications office, so some of my examples and a lot of the examples that I'll use to make some of these points involve content strategy, but I really do think they could be applied to anything. So if you work in a IT office, for example, or an enrollment office, alumni advancement, wherever you kind of physically are, whatever your job tends to be, I think you can apply all these, this framework to each of those endeavors. But in my world, content strategy was the new thing that we were trying to figure out how to succeed at. How do you do content strategy when you're not doing it already? And content strategy was kind of famously and simply defined by Christina Halverson as simply planning for the creation, delivery, and governance of useful, usable content. That's what content strategy is. If you have a content strategist in your office, if you're lucky enough to have one, that's what he or she should be doing. Rahel Bailey's definition of content strategy was a little more involved, I guess, than Christina Halverson's. She describes content strategy as dealing with the planning aspects of managing content throughout its life cycle, and includes aligning content to business goals, analysis, and modeling, and influences the development, production, presentation, evaluation, measurement, and sunsetting of content, including governance. That sounds awesome. That would be so cool if we did that. Why don't we do that? And it is awesome. Raise your hand, audience participation time. If you work in a communications office, do you have, or I guess anywhere, if you work in web communications, if you work in IT, do you have someone whose job it is to plan for and align with business goals the content that you produce? Does anybody have someone like that? Raise your hand if you don't. Yay. That's awesome. That's not awesome. That sucks. We do have someone like that now, and that was where we were at back in 2014 when the European Space Agency was trying to land their spaceship on a comet. We were just endeavoring on this content strategy maneuver. And it's involved a lot of work and people and staffing up and just changing the way we do things. Simple things from editorial calendars and different meetings that help us describe what we're trying to get done, to more complicated things. But it really just boils down to, even if you don't have a content strategy, I think it really does boil down to a simple 4-step framework on how to succeed at practically anything, including content strategy or landing a spaceship on a comet. And those 4 steps are, number 1, focus on the things that matter. Number 2, do those things really, really well. Number 3, tell everyone about the cool thing that you did. Number 4, measure the results. Super simple, right? Not really, I lied. The framework is very simple. And to put it a different way, prioritization, implementation, promotion, and evaluation. And while the framework is super simple, along the way, and each step along the way, there are risks. At each one of those steps, there are great opportunities for success. There are also great opportunities for spectacular failure. So what I'd like to spend the rest of this presentation on is going through each of those steps in the 4-step framework and then showing some examples of things that I think illustrate that step in action and doing those things well. So the first step in our 4-step framework on how to succeed at practically anything is prioritization, and that is focusing on the things that matter. Now, from where I've worked at the University of Rochester for 12 years now. Yeah, 12. And from my perch where I worked as the web person in the communications office, I confess that I sometimes did not have a great handle on what our university's core mission was, because I hate to be the one to tell you, but the core mission of our institutions is not to create websites. The core mission of our universities is not to host web presences or put out press releases if you work in a press office. The core mission of our universities is probably to educate students, to support the original research. There's something about our institutions that they're designed to do, and it's not to create web services. We are usually in a support function, yes? So we're doing important work for our institutions, but we're not the reason our institutions exist. Our websites are not the reason our institutions exist. So how do we know from where we might sit in our institution? If you work in a web services shop or an IT shop or communication shop, how do you know what to focus on? Does your school have a mission statement? Something as simple as that. Does your school have a vision statement or a strategic plan or multiple strategic plans if you're the University of Rochester? Does your school have a brand positioning statement? Find out if these documents exist and read them from wherever you happen to be in the institution. You don't have to work for like the Strategic Research Projects Administration or whatever. Just find out what those documents are and read them. I know mission statements get a bad rep, and not undeservedly so. If you Google mission statement generator, you'll get gems like this for a reason. Our responsibility is to engineer progressive services so that we may endeavor to professionally foster quality information. I'm going to go out like that. But mission statements, for all the ridicule they often receive, can be super useful. Saving people, hunting things, the family business. That's a mission statement. That's motivating. I know exactly what they're about. I'm also, in addition to being a space geek, I'm a huge Supernatural fan. This is my one obligatory Supernatural reference in my presentation. And actually, at the University of Rochester, our mission statement is not that bad. It actually even fits on a t-shirt. That is the university's mission statement. It's not a tagline, it is a mission statement. That is our mission. So I think sometimes, depending on where you are in the institution, you can really feel like you're kind of working away at something that's super important to you and your team to get done, but you don't understand where it fits in your institution's larger goals. And unfortunately, I guess, sometimes it's on you to kind of figure out where the work you're doing fits in with that larger goal so that you can focus on the things that matter. And also politically, so that you can position the things that you're working on in a way that helps you explain them. It helps you explain how they support that mission to others so that you get buy-in. If you know that there are 4 priorities for your institution in the next 5 years, and you can explain how the web migration project you're working on supports one of those and talk about it in the same language, that's going to get you much greater success than if you described it in another way. So here's some examples that we've done at the University of Rochester, again on the communication side, that have kind of tried to do this focus on things that matter front. So for example, we used to, back in the day, back before the spaceship landed on the comet, before 2014, we would just kind of write stories and we would write press releases about important research that our faculty were doing, papers that were published, findings, etc. But they didn't really have broader themes, and you couldn't really ever sort of describe a narrative that kind of pointed to something larger about the institution. That kind of started to change after we got a new VP and we took this new approach. So we did this is a recent example. We have a new Institute for Data Science, and data science is one of the 4 pillars in our research strategic plan. We want to be known for data science at the University of Rochester. So we decided to do, instead of just talking about individual research studies that our professors might have been doing that were linked to data science, we talked about them in a similar way, created a package around data science, and even something as simple as just making a landing page where everything could then kind of fit, and our vice provost for research can take it on the road when he goes out and is trying to talk about us as a home for data science, instead of just having 16 press releases written over the course of a year, kind of out and about. He has a nice little web presentation. So we're kind of doing more of that narrative arc storytelling aligned back to the university's strategic plan or plans. And for the communications office, it's great because then we're able, again, to talk about the work that we're doing in terms of the strategic plan. We are supporting you, and here is proof. Here's proof that we are supporting the institution and its priorities. This is another really great example from another institution, Boston University, research funding. So in the current political climate, I guess it's always been true, research funding at research universities is often under threat. People like to ridicule what they think of as silly examples of silly research being done at a silly university. So Boston University decided for them, growing their research dollars and their research funding was a huge priority for them. So they didn't just write stories about the research their researchers were doing, they actually did a package around research funding and how it works to kind of demystify it a little bit and try to explain how do professors get grants, how much work does it take to get a grant, what is the ultimate impact for both the institution and the world of knowledge creation in general. So they kind of took it upon themselves to write this really deep, almost like a special investigation, a special report on the process of research funding, because talking about research funding in a positive way was a strategic priority to them, because they're under threat, like a lot of higher education institutions feel, for research funding and losing research funding. So they kind of took that mission on themselves to be able to explain that to their audiences. And this is a final example of, again, focusing on things that matter that I love. It's a couple of years old now, but I think it still really holds up. This is a video, and I'm going to play it. It's like 2 minutes, but it's real. It makes, and because it's science, it almost makes me cry. Every time I see happy scientists, I just get very emotional. So I'll set it up a little bit. This is an example of from Stanford, where there's a retired professor and a younger professor. The retired professor has spent his entire life theorizing around this theory of how the universe began. The younger professor has just completed an experiment that has some findings that prove this man's theory or support his theory, the work of his lifetime. And he's going to report those findings to the professor at his house. Can people hear?
Stanford University.
Okay. Thanks.
Today, I'm going to deliver a news to Professor Andre Linde, who is the founding father of inflation. So inflation is the theory about the bang of Big Bang. It explains why we have all this stuff in the universe. So today, I'm going to tell him our experiment, Bicep 2, based at South Pole, has found the smoking gun evidence of inflation. He has no idea that I'm coming.
Why?
So I have a surprise for you.
Wow.
It's 5 sigma at 0.2.
Discovery.
Yes.
What? Just a second.
Can you repeat it? 5 sigma, as clear as day, R of 0.2.
Can you repeat it again?
R 0.2 plus minus
Point
all
two.
five. So,
You don't expect anybody, Renato, it's probably some kind of delivery. Did you order anything? Yeah, I ordered 30 years ago. Finally, it arrived.
Cheers, cheers.
Congratulations.
Oh my God, I'm going to break. We are talking right now about the billions of a billions of a billions of a millions of a second after the Big Bang. So we see the phase of the Big Bang. It is an image of these gravitational waves, which are purely quantum gravity feature of what was produced in the Big Bang. So this is a remaining part of the story.
It's really hard.
They all there. They
They're all
create
there.
different experiments.
Yes.
If this is true, this is a moment of understanding of nature of such a magnitude that it just overwhelms. And let's see, let's just hope that it's not a trick. I always live with this feeling, what if I'm tricked? What if I believe into this just because it is beautiful? What if, yes. So this is really helpful to have events like that. It's really, really helpful. Thank you so much for doing it.
Feels, oh, right in the feels, right there.
For more, please visit us at Stanford.
Plug for Stanford. Subscribe to their YouTube channel. Okay. I love when he says, you know, what if all this time I've been tricked? What if I believed this just because it was beautiful and now he's got proof? I just like, oh, gets me. But I love this as not just as a great example of video storytelling, which it very much is, but at Stanford, they were able, when this story broke, when the science behind the work that these guys that had done broke, it was a big story. You know, their press office publicized it, it got picked up, it got all the things that people who work in your communications offices love, national media attention. But the national media attention was focused on the science and the research and the researchers. And this was Stanford's way of being able to connect two of their, you know, rock star faculty members in this really kind of emotional way that said something about Stanford, I think, and said something about these two individuals, but also said something about Stanford, that this is a place where people are passionate about what they do and got an opportunity to show science and the work of scientists in this different way that the outside media wasn't going to cover. But they don't need the outside media to tell that story. They can tell it themselves. And this video has, like, I forget how many millions of hits. It's over 2 million hits on YouTube. So it's obviously a good success story for Stanford. And it's done really, really well, which brings us to the next step in our framework, which is implementation, or doing things really, really well. We all have to do stupid stuff sometimes. We all have to kind of salute and execute and sort of suck it up and just do stuff to get stuff done. But I don't think we should let that reality become an excuse for just phoning it in. You have your opportunities to pick your moments and shine and to do things really, really well. And a lot of times, and this example is going to come from social media, we get asked to do things. We get the phone call to, you know, can you post this to our Facebook page? And this is like an event listing from a PDF calendar or something stupid. And you're like, no. And then you get told you have to, and then you're like, crap. And then you go ahead and do it. But we can't really, you can't really afford anymore to do things that are meh. Most of the stuff that we do most of the time is not going to rise to the level of the Stanford professor's discovery. It's not going to be that substantively important. But if you can find ways to take the meh and make it marvelous, try to figure out a way to make that thing that you're executing on just execute really, really well. There's no room anymore for doing things in a kind of an average way. And happily, when you're asked to do something horrible, you have a really great detector, a built-in detector that tells you when something is meh, when you hate it. If you hate it, your users or your audience is not going to go, wow, that's exactly what I wanted. Thank you so very much. Please, let's do more of that. No, if you can't stand it, you know that it's not good. So follow your built-in crap detector. And if you understand, or if you are feeling that something is not what it should be, see if you can figure out from your own little perch again how to do something really, really well. Because that you really do need to rise above the average and the clutter and the noise anymore to kind of get attention. So some examples of this part of the framework, executing on things really, really well. from my institution, if I do say so myself. I have nothing to do with any of this. This was all our photographer and our brilliant scientists. So we did a story recently about these little tiny parasitic wasps. They're like this big. They're not like the wasps that you probably know and love, but little tiny wasps. They are able to switch up their genes. Their genes are able to evolve in such a way that they can change from being a venom to being anti-venom inside the same wasp. It's how they embed a host body and survive. So the mechanism by which they do that has been really interesting and has helped people figure out other things about how genes evolve. So we were doing this story. The videographer in our office, so this is photography from our excellent photographer, Adam, of those tiny little wasps in action. But then our videographer, who was working with the researcher, came up with this brilliant idea where he kind of wrote the word venom in sugar water in a petri dish. And then they just let the wasps out. This guy's lab, by the way, if you walk into this professor's lab, there's wasps everywhere. They're just loose in the lab. They're like, I mean, not on purpose, they escape. The videographer was like, he had to go back multiple times to shoot things. And there's graduate students that work in there and students that work in there, but yeah, there's just insects. It's the insect lab at Duke University. It's very, very cool. It's a very cool place. But this was an example of, we had some time. This is a professor who, he's in the news a lot. He does a lot of work around genetics and evolution. So we're trying to figure out, is there a way to take this story and make it visual, because he's a videographer, but what can we do beyond just, showing the actual insect? Is there something else we can do to showcase this story and do something different, do something really, really well? And this worked really well. We were able, this was our video background on our homepage for a few days. We did a version of it for Instagram, it was on Facebook. So when you have that kind of asset, that kind of material, it just makes life easier for everybody, because if you have something that is done really, really well, your work is done for you pretty much. This is another example from our university that's a little different. I mean, not every story is going to be about parasitic wasps changing the content of their genetics. This was a more I guess what I'd say, a more typical story, a more routine story around self-determination theory. So two of our professors basically created this concept 30 years ago called self-determination theory. They're psychologists, and if you've ever heard people talk about extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic motivation, that's these two guys. They came up with that. The idea that you're more motivated by intrinsic rewards than extrinsic rewards. So you're more motivated by feelings of appreciation and gratitude than you are by money or grades. That's their theory of human behavior. It's called self-determination theory. And they just wrote a new book that's basically like their career capstone. It's like a new overview of self-determination theory. And in the bad old days, before the spaceship landed on the comet, we would have done a press release about the book. Professors, 30-year veteran professors write book published. Yay, book published. We don't do that anymore, so we're trying to think like, well, how can we tell this story in a way that says something more about the university other than the fact that a book was published. So one of our writers wrote a nice long-form piece about a magazine piece for our alumni magazine about or for our news center, about them and their work. And at the time, we didn't have any images to illustrate the story. We had headshots of the professors. So we have years worth of headshots of Ed Deasy and Richard Ryan, but that's it. And our photographer, the same guy who shot the parasitic wasps, had said at a kind of lunch and learn session about images the week before, we were talking about stock photography and how sometimes we have to find stock photography to use on our news site, and it's very challenging to find things. And he just he's a very quiet, super competent, hugely talented person. But he just kind of pipes up and says, I can shoot, if we ever need stock, we can make our own stock. You don't have to go, if we have time, it's always a matter of time. If we have time, we can create our own stock photography. And I honestly, that was like a light bulb moment for me. I never even thought about that I could just walk down, he's 2 offices from mine, but I could just walk down to his office and be like, I have an idea for a stock image. I have a Getty Images account, but the thing that I want doesn't exist. Can you shoot it? Hugely talented photographer who I've known for 10 years and lives right there. Like, yes, actually I can. That's fantastic. So he created this image. We kind of conceptualized what this idea of self-determination theory. So she's like going after the heart instead of going after the carrot and the money and the reward. And now our alumni magazine editor is using that in the alumni magazine version of it. We used it on the news center. We had a homepage graphic again. So now instead of 2 headshots of 2 professors because they wrote a book, we have this awesome piece of content about the same event. So it's just an example of changing up your mindset about how to start doing things really, really well instead and take the meh and make it something marvelous. Here's some examples of, in other realms, just things that I think exemplify this step in our framework to people who do things really, really well. If you're in any way involved in social media management at your school or know colleagues who are, Georgia Tech has my favorite Facebook page of all higher ed Facebook pages. It's awesome. I don't know if anyone here is from Georgia or knows anyone at that school, but you can tell, yeah, or as an alum. They're also the Yellow Jackets, and we're the Yellow Jackets, which is fine. They are much better Yellow Jackets on the sports field anyway than our Yellow Jackets. But you can tell right away if you look at their Facebook page that they have a strategy behind it. It's all about pride. It's all about every time, every football game, every time someone gets married and the Ramblin' Wreck from Georgia Tech is at their wedding, like they go crazy for their alumni base and anything that's about Georgia Tech pride. The heck of an engineer. Anytime one of them is in modern mechanics or has done something, they're on it in a really great, personable, confident Facebook way. So I would definitely recommend checking them out if you want to see a Facebook page done really, really well. This is my new favorite Instagram account. This was before I found the Webster Dictionary Instagram account, though, too, which if you're not following Webster's on social, you should, because they are kicking butt. They are very cool. But this is the Transportation Security Administration, the TSA. Their Instagram account is awesome. And it's one guy who runs it. He was at a social media conference that I went to. And he was basically saying, like, I work for the TSA, all right? Everybody hates us. Like, what can we do on social that can work, number one, and kind of get attention and engagement, but say something about us that's also meaningful. So check out their account. It's really great. They post things. They have this really clever voice where they manage to be both informational with a little bit of tone to it at the same time. So they'll post pictures of stupid stuff that people tried to get into their bags onto a flight, and then they'll have like a little funny caption, and it'll say, "Oh, by the way, you're not allowed to bring throwing stars onto the plane." Like news you can use.
They did or that I understand what you're saying, but that's my first thought.
They really are kind of owning it. They do pictures of whenever they have a new dog that graduates from their dog academy, the security dogs. They do pictures of that. They're awesome. And lastly, this is an example of, this is an ad. This is an annual fun ad. Yay! I love annual fun ads. That's everyone's favorite piece of content, right? Like if you can take an annual fun ad and turn it into something awesome, you are killing it. Gold star for the day, you get to go home early. This is from Oberlin, and I'll just read the top of it. Remember that one frat party that got totally out of control and we set fire to furniture and flipped over cars? Yeah, we don't either. We went to Oberlin. And then it goes on. Help others have experiences like going to the library for a few hours each night and kind of liking it, and paying attention in class and engaging in discussions and feeling moved by a concert or a work of art. Give to the annual fund. Like I've never been to Oberlin. I have no connections to Oberlin. I want to give to their annual fund after reading that ad copy. So do things, take the time to figure out a way to do things really, really well. Even when you're presented with something that feels like an opportunity to do something meh, try to find the marvelous in the meh. That's step 2. Step 3, promotion, or tell everyone about the cool thing that you just did. You've taken the time to do something really cool, now you can tell people about it. I confess this is the one that I struggle with the most, or struggle with remembering to do the most. I kind of, I'll be on a team, I'll be working on something and it's done and it launches, and I'm kind of the last person who wants to celebrate it. I'm kind of just like tick, or more accurately like, oh my God, that's done. But you kind of have to take a moment to make sure that the people that you are supporting know that you're supporting them and how you are supporting them. It is your job to make sure that your boss, your clients, and your coworkers know what you do for a living. Because if you don't tell them, who will? You need to be a little bit of a self-evangelist, and I kind of forget to do that sometimes. We'll launch a new set of campus maps, and my boss, like 2 weeks later, will be like, "What happened to the maps? They're awesome!" Like, "Oh yeah, we launched that." And I'm like, "Oh, well, did you put it in the faculty staff newsletter? Did you, who did you tell?" Like, you. Duh. But you really do have to remember to let people know that you are a resource for them and that you're doing work, even if the work to you, again, seems kind of like the mundane, the possibly mundane work of your job. You need to make sure that you're selling yourself and kind of giving yourself and your team a little bit of credit. And that's what my boss calls this, my new boss calls this getting credit. We need to make sure we get credit for the things we do. So if it's something as simple as when we did that WASP video, in the old days, if we had done that, I would have done exactly what we did, put it on the homepage and do all the things. But now, and this just seems, it's funny to say it, but because in retrospect, it's like, well, of course, but we weren't doing it. And I don't know if this is true where you are, but now the press officer will, he takes a screenshot of the homepage and embeds it in an email and sends a link off to the professor who's in China and says, here, we're featuring your work today on the University of Rochester homepage. Here's a screenshot, visit the link at www.rochester.edu. And he's like, oh my God, that's amazing. And we wouldn't have, I don't think we would have done that before. It's like an extra step to make sure that the people that you're working for know that you're working for them and know that you're doing amazing things. Sort of selfishly around budget time, if you're sitting in an office of 12 people and people don't know what those 12 people do, you might be a bit of a target when people are looking to make cuts. So if you are able to describe and promote yourself and the work of your team to people in a way that, again, links back to those things that matter, focuses on things that matter, you position yourself much better than if you just kind of quietly keep your head down and plug away. One way that we've done this idea of getting credit, is around our editorial planning and promotion process, which seems a little counterintuitive, but we're a little disconnected, but let me explain it for a second. So we've started using a couple of tools internally in the office just to kind of help our own office work together better. My office has about 32 people in it in central communications. It's everyone from the photographers and videographers, web communications, which is where I am, the press officers, who are now called communications officers, our creative services folks, so those are the graphic designers, illustrators, they do our alumni magazine, print publications. So it's a big shop. And even within that shop, we're very siloed. So there will be times that I have no idea no idea that the graphic designer across the hall from me has been working on a new identity system for the facilities, trucks, and vans. Like, that's what he's doing. That's part of his job. But I have no way of, we've never really talked about that, even internally. Our team manages our university social media accounts, but we would never report out to like the press officers or the graphic designers what was going on social media. Like, what are our plans for the upcoming week and month? What are our statistics? How have we done? What are things doing on social media? So we're using tools like Basecamp and Slack to kind of break down those internal silos within communications and just make sure that everyone in communications knows that some awesome thing is going on down the hall in creative services, or some awesome thing is going on. Web services just finished the new art gallery website and it's launched and it's awesome, and we're going to have cookie cake on Friday to celebrate. We never did those kind of things before, and now we do. So we kind of give ourselves a little moment to shine and keep the office connected in this kind of ambient way. So anytime you're on Slack or Basecamp, you can dip in and see what other people are doing. Another example of this idea of telling people about the coolest thing you did is applying for and hopefully winning awards, which again is not something I really kind of did a lot of before I had a team of my own. I used to just be one person, again, the web person. Now there's 3 of us in this new reorg digital team. And I kind of, now that it's not just me, I'm kind of like, I want my team to get, I want to go to the PRC Awards and see if we win anything. That'd be kind of cool. And it doesn't take a huge amount of time to fill out an application for an award for something. And it's, again, politically, another thing you can bring back to your leadership and to your colleagues and say, like, it's an external validator of the work that you do. So take the time to think about the things that you do every year and what you might apply for awards for. It's something simple, but it can go a long way to show your value and support as a support group to the rest of the university. And finally, after you've done all this awesome work and you've told everybody how awesome it is, you need to actually measure the results. And I think the most important thing is about measuring the results is being honest about expectations. I think the two go hand in hand. So you need to be honest with yourself about the amount of effort that something is going to take, and then what result you will then be happy with. I like the question, what does victory look like? So at the end of the day, are we going to be super excited? What are we going to be super excited about if it happens? And what are we going to be disappointed by? So some examples from our office, we do, it actually should be updated to say we do daily, weekly, and monthly reporting of all kinds of things on the digital team. And in the old days, before the spaceship landed on the comet, we would just share the reports with my little team. So we would do daily reports on social media engagement. We would do monthly reports on news center traffic, but we would just share them within the web team, which in hindsight, super stupid. You're creating a report, so you might as well share them with the larger group. And they're, of course, free to ignore them, but it's an opportunity to kind of crow about something and also grow their understanding about what is working and succeeding on channels that they might not be familiar with, including some social media channels. So here's a couple of examples of how we approach this at the U of R. So for example, on Facebook, we've set a couple of internal expectations for ourselves. So on our university Facebook page, our team manages the university's page. Of course, like probably is the case at your institutions, there's lots of Facebook presences. We manage the flagship one. And when we post something to a page, we've said to ourselves that we're going to be happy whenever we reach 50% organic reach and 1% engagement on any of our posts. We have 55,000 followers on our Facebook page. So if we have over 28,000 people reach it organically, we get excited about that. And we send out these daily reports where we say, like, here's everything we posted to social media yesterday. And we're trying to start using some, we use native tools right now to put this together. So we're trying to start using some more automated tools, Falcon Social in particular, to make this a little easier. But we share this with the entire team to say, like, you know, we're not just putzing around when we're posting things to Twitter or Facebook. This is part of our job, and this is how things are getting distributed and seen by people. This is how your work, communications officers, is getting out there. We've struggled to, not struggle, that's too strong word, but we're attempting or endeavoring to make people aware, both in our office and outside it, that social in particular is a destination too, and that's how we're using what we're using these reports for. It's not all about driving traffic back to the news center or to the homepage. People can have an experience of your content and learn something about your institution or your brand on those platforms themselves. So we'd get obsessed with hits. You know, how many hits are we getting to that story? And kind of ignoring the leadership anyway was kind of ignoring the fact that people were seeing it on Facebook, even if Facebook wasn't driving traffic back to the website. So if our strategy for Facebook is not necessarily to drive traffic back to the newsroom, but to give people an experience on Facebook, that changes how you write, what you post, what you choose to post on those platforms. It also just makes you think about all of the platforms that you have a strategy for and a presence on. What can you do on those platforms that give people an experience of that story? The WASP animated GIF is an example. On Instagram, if we want to be able to show people something that works on Instagram that tells that story about that researcher, we need to be thinking in that way from the get-go. So I can tell Adam, our awesome photographer, that his photos, you know, this is our bonfire night. So for orientation every year, they do a bonfire at the end of orientation. He shoots it every year. And he comes in at, you know, 11 o'clock at night to do that. And he would be forgiven for thinking, like, why am I doing this? So that it's going to be, you know, if it's only ever going to appear in like the annual report next year, can't we just use last year's bonfire? It's the same fire. He's never said that, and he would never say that. But if he's taking the time and doing this work, he's sharing the photos with us, we're sharing them on social. If we're able to tell him that his photos were seen by 30,000 people, he should know that. That's his work. Like, why am I keeping that to myself in my little digital team? So measuring the results and getting those results out to people who either care about the work or are responsible for the work is hugely important. It also has helped us with this notion of describing, in particular, social media as a destination, not just a refer of traffic back. If I can say that 30,000 people saw these photos, our local newspaper has a circulation of about 80,000. If Adam got his photos in the local newspaper, people in our office would be high-fiving. They'd be like, oh, did you see Adam's photo was on the front page of the B section? That was so sweet. And it would be sweet. It'd be cool. But if we can have his photos seen by 50,000 people on Facebook, why are we not getting as excited by that? And is it because we, you know, on our team aren't talking about it in that way? So again, these examples I think they're native to my world in the communications area, but I think you can hopefully see applications to how you can apply these to things outside of that. Because it really is a virtuous circle. I talk about them as steps. Focus on the things that matter, do those things really, really well, tell everyone about the cool thing you did, and then measure the results. But it really, each of them kind of feed on each other. When you measure the results, you get time to focus on the things that were successful. And when you have time, you can do those things really, really well. And this is my High Web plug slide before I wrap up. The High Web conference, if you have folks in your offices, or of course you yourself, who are looking for a really great professional development experience that really covers the gamut of the web. So if you're a WordPress developer, backend developer, content contributor, marketing communications person, graphic designer, really anything that covers the web in higher ed, High Web is a great place for some great professional development this October. So I hope we can see you and some of your team up in New England when the leaves fall. The leaves will be dropping, and we'll be dropping some knowledge. It'll be fun. And I think I've got 5 minutes for questions.
Any questions? First, thank you, Lori. That was awesome.
I did tweet out the link to my slides, or at least I hope I did, because I scheduled it. But, I'm at Lori PA on Twitter.
Who's got the first question?
Okay, Ryan.
Here we go.
How do you deal with information overload?
So,
Personally,
repeat for our live
Oh,
stream.
sorry. How do I deal with information overload? Beer and. Do you mean like how to get your stuff out into a world that's kind of noisy and like from a communication standpoint?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a very good question, and I think that the step 2 of that framework, doing things really, really well, is really kind of step 1. We contribute to information overload as much as anybody else. You know, we say we're victims of it, and we are, but we're also the cause of it. When you're publishing that, you know, that PDF invite to an event that half the people on your Facebook page can't attend because they don't live in your city, but you posted it because someone told you to, nonsense that we all contribute to. The more you can push back on contributing to information overload and really only posting the things, I'm speaking very specifically about the social media world that I live in, but only focusing on those things that you really know have a great opportunity to shine and tell the story that you want to tell to the audience that's on that platform at that time. I think that's how you can cut through. Yeah.
I think all this stuff's great, but the one thing is the evaluation. Having that time to go back to that is always my issue. Do you template your reports, or how much time do you spend on creating?
We do have a template for our reports, so we do. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. The question was about the time it takes to do that evaluation, and then it's hard to kind of have the time to go back and look at something. Do you create templates for your reports, and how much time does all that measuring take? We do daily reports of social media traffic. That was the one screenshot that I showed. My associate editor does that, and it probably we sort of schedule time to do daily, weekly, and monthly reporting. So every morning, Dawn will spend about a half hour, 45 minutes creating that report, and it's part of her job. Like that's the thing that she does, and she's basically using a Google Doc spreadsheet to copy and paste stuff together, and she's using the native tools of these platforms. What we're trying to get to, and I'll be honest, it's been a bit of a struggle, but we're getting there. We bought a product a year and a half ago called Falcon Social. It's sort of like a Sprout Hootsuite kind of platform, but it's different. That allows you to do some of this measuring and reporting. And what we've not been able to do is do the same reporting that we can do in the native tools better and faster in Falcon, and that's what we're trying to get. And long story short, we got a new success rep at Falcon, and she's much more helpful than the previous guy. So shout out to Falcon Social. We're hoping that we can do those daily reports in a little more of an automated, templated way, like you say. The weekly reports I do for our news center traffic before the editorial meeting. And again, those take you like a half hour every Tuesday to do. And then the monthly reports I do on the first of the month. And those are basically pretty executive versions of these more day-to-day reports that go up to the vice president. So it's really kind of a matter of understanding what the people that we're giving these reports want to know, and then scheduling the time to do it, just making it part of your day. The daily social reports have been hugely helpful just for our own day-to-day, because it just, in addition to just understanding how things fare, it really does affect how and the voice and tone and how you actually post, because you get a sense of it. Like you start to be able to predict when something's going to do really, really well on Instagram or when something's going to flop on Facebook. So you just get more kind of internal intelligence around how that all works. Oh, back in there.
Do you ever get pushback on the stats where people see a success and expect that on everything?
No, I haven't had that experience. I've had the flip experience where we'll have. I'm sorry. Sorry, live stream people. Keep forgetting you're there. The question was, do we ever get pushback when we have a big success in the numbers? You know, why are we getting that success for other things? What we hear more often is if we go through a period of time where we haven't had a big success or and people not understanding why. When we do those daily reports, we don't send the numbers out in a vacuum. There's always a paragraph at the end that's kind of my associate who does the report and me, just kind of our attempt at explaining what's going on, not just sending out numbers alone in a spreadsheet. So there's always a little paragraph exposition on what we think is going on.
How do you, like, if something does go bad, and like there's a social media backpack to it, how do you guys do damage? I don't know if not already in the election.
Yep. So the question was, when things do go bad on social and there's a backlash to something, how do we deal with that? We do deal with that a lot. Not a lot, not more than the average institution. I think it happens more often on the platform of Twitter than anywhere else, where people use Twitter as a way to kind of be grumpy at you.
Yeah, because it's only 140.
Yeah, like that's really all you can effectively do on Twitter is be grumpy sometimes. And we don't respond. We certainly don't respond to every single institutional mention of University of Rochester. We wouldn't be able to. But we do use both Falcon Social and native tools to track mentions of ourselves, to track mentions of important people at our institution. So we want to know if people are talking about our president in a way that we don't want them to be talking about him, to be able to get in front of some things. So we're constantly monitoring that kind of stuff. And we do very routinely, like daily, respond back and forth to people on both negative and positive things. I think that's part of why social is called social, because it's social. Yeah. But yeah, we try to capture that too for leadership, so they understand that there's a two-way street here that we can't ignore. It's not just a microphone or a megaphone. It's an opportunity. And for a long time, it's less true now, but for a long time that was, I think, an element of the power of social media that some folks in our office just didn't get because it wasn't part of their it wasn't just part of how they approached the business of communications before. So it just took a little bit of a learning curve for folks, but I think we do a pretty good job of it now.
Thank you, Lori.
All right.
Remember to get your online email.